What if you could go back in time, knowing all the things I know now? How many things would you change in building a £5 million fashion brand? How many of the lessons would you take and not make the same mistakes I did when I first started? In this video, we're going to rewind back in time, back to 2017, to when I first started my fashion brand. And we're going to go year by year and uncover all the lessons and mistakes I made in a timeline so that they are relevant to you at each stage of your journey. So in this video, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to dive into this video now and break down exactly the lessons of each stage of my journey. As you can see here, we've got a full timeline of all the years and all the lessons down below. So let's just get started on one of the first years here. So when you get started, it's more than often that you're going to be overanalyzing things, you're going to procrastinate, you're going to have a business plan, but the main key thing is to start before you actually feel ready. The truth is, there's never a right time to actually start. If you wait for the perfect time, you'll always be waiting for that perfect moment to start that business. And if I can give you one piece of advice, it's that clarity often comes through action. And if you're constantly overthinking, you're planning things, I will do this by X date, I need to get this and this sorted, but you don't actually put any action in, it's just going to remain on the goals and dream post. So what you need to do is take action. The first thing, write down exactly what you need to do and go out and do it. Clarity is only going to come through actually taking action. And if you're constantly in the analysis paralysis stage, you're just not going to get anything done. So the next thing is actually develop a tunnel light vision. You need to block out all the noise, stay focused on the end goal, and realize it will take time. Focus on the next step right in front of you. Otherwise, if you were to look out and span out how much things you have to do over the years to get where you want to go, you're just going to feel overwhelmed. You're not going to know exactly where to start, and it's just going to be too overwhelming for you. You need to focus on the next step right in front of you and just take it each and every day at a time. So the next thing is to make sure you secure the trademark in the UK and worldwide if possible. Now, when I first started, I secured the UK trademark but left out the worldwide one. And if you want to sell to the EU, sell to America, you're going to make sure that you register this and make sure that you get the trademark as well. It's going to avoid so many issues later down the line, because if you start a brand, you don't have this secured, you might have to change it down the line. And if you bought upfront stock, it's going to be so much harder for you to then restart again. You're going to have to rebrand everything. You're going to have to chuck away all that stock, and you're going to have to effectively start again. The main key thing here in 2017 was that you will make mistakes. That's just part of the process and how you learn. You can reduce the expensive ones by actually learning from someone who has actually done this before. So if you can find someone that's done it before, ask them questions. They should give you advice and help on things. Just do as much as you can, but also, take some of the nuggets that, I'm going to basically show you in this video. So the next thing is to learn to do as much as you possibly can yourself in the early stages. This is to keep costs low, and it gives you real control over the brand. So from your logo, your website, you need to have a very good understanding of doing everything yourself before you actually later on down the line outsource stuff. It's also going to keep costs low, and this is what you need to do in the early stages. I've seen so many people spend 5K on a website, do all this bunch of stuff before they've even actually sold a single product. So this is what you need to do right at the start. The next one is use the platforms which are available to you. We've got Adobe Illustrator for tech packs, Photoshop for editing, we've got Shopify for your website. You can start with very, very little. So now that I'm going to take you to 2018, which was the first sort of year starting. And as you can see from this bit here, This was my very first sample that I actually picked out of my wardrobe. And as you can see, it's pretty terrible. The sizing was off, and we actually went to a couple of different factories. And in the end, we ended up settling on this factory. And one of the biggest mistakes I made here was I made samples with one factory, and I assumed that I could just take that over to another factory and without sampling and order some stock. So that was the very first big mistake. So the main key thing from this lesson here was that don't make your logo your USP. At the very beginning, a logo is never enough. A logo is a marketing tool, yes. However, it's not to be confused with the USP of the brand and how you differentiate yourself from the competition. If you are, just starting out, you haven't filled in your brand values, nailed your vision, it's not something that's going to do a whole lot for you. It can also be a reason for people not to buy your products. For an example, if you have big logos slapped everywhere, it's going to put off a lot of consumers as well. And the very big mistake that I first started out was just putting logos on t-shirts, as you can see here, and expecting them to be, sold just because it's my brand. And that is one of the biggest mistakes you can make, using that logo as a USP. And the biggest thing I would take away if I was to look back at my journey from 2018 was that sometimes if you have a limited budget, it's better to just start with blank suppliers. Now, blank suppliers weren't really a thing back then. I didn't really know of them. So blank suppliers, if you're not already aware, are just blank garments that you can buy that you can then print on, and you can't customize them too much. Some blank suppliers actually offer you to, put custom prints on them. Some actually do them, but they're just a ready-made garment that you can put your graphic, logos on, stuff like that. And it helps you get started with low MOQs. There's no MOQs to them. Say, for example, if you wanted to order, 2 to 3 pieces, you can do so. You can do it on a very limited amount of budget. So that's the thing I would change if I was starting out again. If you want to order in bulk, make sure you test it first. Let data guide your decisions. Now, a lot of people will blank over this when they first start the brand, but data is going to be the number one key factor that in these timelines we'll go over it over and over again. It's because that often your judgment is not what the market actually wants. So you can like one thing, but it doesn't mean the market actually wants that product as well. So make sure when you order stock that you have tested it before. You can run paid ads to your site. You can have products on your site that you're not selling. You can always refund the customer later on. But having some data there to guide your decisions, and before committing, money, hard-earned money that you have to starting your brand, you don't know if this product's going to sell or not. So make sure you have data to back that in between. And if you can have a bigger budget and afford to buy bulk stock, you can always order more in the future. But cash tied up in excess inventory is a huge risk when you're first starting out. So go small, go for the basic MOQs, don't go for a massive order, even if you've got the budget there. When you're first starting out, you're not going to have the data, the customer data, to tell you exactly what products are going to sell. So always go in low MOQs. You can always order more later on. So the next thing is make sure to choose the right manufacturers. It becomes even more important when you're starting out, because if you get burned straight away, that's your budget gone. Make sure to, allocate a specific amount of budget and not set all of that budget on the first collection. You need some money left over for marketing, for the operations, maybe have, a small office or something like that. Make sure you have cash left over for that. And make sure when you do choose a factory, do your proper due diligence. Look at how long they've been in business, see if they've got factory certifications, and see if they can actually show you, past orders from past clients or current clients. So let's actually get on to the next one. So the next one is actually download WeChat and get their contact details. Now, WeChat is a platform in China, just like WhatsApp in the UK. They use it for payments, speaking to each other, like socials and stuff like that. It's always better to communicate over WeChat. Speak to them more directly, and it's just going to be miles better for communication and stuff like that. Now, the next one on here is to avoid the trap of business cards, custom flyers, air fresheners like I did, just these little things that take so much of your budget and time that just too many people obsess over, and it doesn't actually really matter. So don't spend too long on that. Focus on the main thing that's going to move the needle forwards, which is product and marketing. So the next thing, test multiple factories, compare pricing, samples, speed, communication, and reliability before actually deciding. And I think final ones, reverse engineer your first collection. Look at your competitors' bestsellers and identify which styles are already selling. Say, for an example, you have a brand that you want to slightly mimic. Maybe go on their website. You can use a sort of URL within Shopify, put that in the URL top, and it's a certain certain link that you can sort the bestsellers in Shopify. It's a quick little hack that I used in the sort of dropshipping days as well, where you can sort by bestsellers. Just enables you to see which colorways are selling, see which styles are actually selling the best, but also use this as a guide, because some of the data can give you false sort of data, because it could include the lifetime bestsellers, which could just be a standard t-shirt. So go to maybe a new collection page and then sort it by bestsellers there. So the next one, which ties back to some of the first points, is when you are starting out, make sure to include a statement piece, something that's going to grab the attention of the market, something that's going to separate yourself from the rest of the other brands out there. Because if you're coming in with a standard t-shirt, standard logo, or standard design, you're just going to blend in when you start to run ads, market your products. No one's going to really want to buy your products, because why? You need a USP there. You need something that's going to pull the audience to your brand, and something in which, they can't get anywhere else. They're going to have to come to your brand to get that product. So this could be, think about aesthetics, fits, fabrics, prints. Think about all these things when it comes to, creating your product. And the last thing is have a sense of urgency. Things need to be done fast, but don't confuse fast with low quality. Make sure to get things done all the time with speed and urgency. So the next thing on this timeline, just showing you a few pictures of the journey here. So this was me in my office, and we had a bunch of shelving here. And this was at the time when things weren't really kicking off for me. I spent money on stock. I had money sat there, but it just wasn't really selling. We was at a point in time where we're changing the brand identity, trying things to make things work. At the time, it was an athleisure brand, and this was like a fitness sort of fashion brand. As you can see here, the pictures down below, and we was getting orders, but the orders were like a couple a day. And then the next week we wouldn't get too many, and it was very inconsistent. And if we just go to the lessons down here, I was shooting the products myself with friends and stuff like that, which we'll get onto. But here are actually the 2019 lessons. So when something isn't working, don't be afraid to switch things up. Sansbrel started as an athleisure brand combining fitness and fashion, but it took me 3 iterations, 3 attempts at changing the brand before it finally started to click. Don't go and marry, the first brand idea that you have, because the market might want something else. The next thing as well is one hero product is all that you need. You might have heard this, many times before, but you only need that one product, that one garment that's going to take your brand to the next level. One key item can drive in 80% of that revenue. So don't focus on, building massive collections at the very beginning. You need one key USP product that's going to tie your brand identity to that product. And for us, it was our cargo pants. We started out with, more sort of graphic t-shirts, which kind of give us a leverage to then get onto them. But you're not going to know this at the start. It's going to sort of come to you as you collect more data. So the next thing is get your products professionally shot in a studio and on a model. Even if it means spending a bit more, your results actually depend on this. So as with fashion, as with a lot of things in e-com, images are going to sell your products. And I made the mistake of trying to do everything myself. As you can see in this picture here, I was doing a lot of photography. It wasn't bad, as you can see here, I got a friend on a model that I used as a model, but make sure to spend that bit extra. Get a studio if you can. It's going to make such a big impact to your conversion rates, and it's going to improve everything from your content. And that's the main thing that people are going to, decide whether to buy your products or not. Now, the next thing is to sell your brand, you need either one of two things. You need to either to attract customers through content by creating visuals and stories that make people want to buy into your brand, or you can lead with a more product offer. So what I mean by this is something that generally stands out in the market that can't be found elsewhere. Some customers actually have to come to you. Again, tying the USP thing. Again, you can... How many brands have you seen that have a standard logo on a t-shirt, but because they have nailed their content, they draw people into the brand through, their messaging, what they stand for, they then sell products. So in my eyes, you only really have two ways. You have that way in which you can draw through content, visual storytelling, it's very sort of story based, or you can have products that people just want to buy. So in my eyes, having products that people want to buy is the easiest route, because sometimes, the visual storytelling, it's very hard to get people connected with a brand. You've got to do, it takes so much effort, and it takes a while as well to get people in your brand. So the next one is 2020. This was like a key inflection point for us. And we started to then find out what was working and sort of transition the brand into more of a streetwear brand. As you can see here, this was obviously a very small stock room. We had this, and it was still sort of a athleisure brand here. But 2020 lessons was that let the data guide your decisions. Far too many people focus on what they want versus what the customer actually wants. And most people in fashion are designers and creators first. So they're very good with, designing stuff, and they are very, very much sort of business minded second. So a lot of people actually let creativity cloud the judgment and data. And the one key thing I want to say here is that you don't want to be the starving artist. You don't want to be the artist that creates stuff that no one really wants to buy because, you just like it, but it's not what the market wants. So that's another key thing I would add here. So the next thing is that we ran into issues with the factory. Again, not doing our due diligence with factories. We ended up with poor quality, inconsistencies, and this is always why it's always important to have factory backups, always be testing new factories and working towards securing a long-term reliable partner. Now, we actually offer, again, the factories in which I created Sans Pareil with to other people as well. So if that is something that you're wanting, just check the link in the description below. But up until this point, growth was, fairly steady. I spent a lot on stock. I hadn't really had much back in return, slow sales. And this was due to my lack of experience, and the products weren't great at that time either. And at this point in time, I went into dropshipping. It was around the end of 2019. I went into dropshipping because of two reasons. Number one was cash flow, and number two was to get the skills I needed, running paid ads, running offers, managing a team. All these different things come into play when you can scale up a dropshipping brand and you don't have the limitations of buying stock up front. You don't know if it's going to work. You're just testing products as you go along. And my idea was that I was going to use what I now call the DS brand method, where you basically use dropshipping to fund your long-term brand. And dropshipping taught me the skills, and it transferred directly into fashion. Testing multiple products, creative strategy, ads. And the important thing here was, don't be afraid to make changes and to pivot in the short term in order to get your long-term result and what you want out of the brand as success. So the main thing that I want to share here is I see so often brands quit because they don't hit it off instantly, or I can also see the opposite, where people hold on to a brand that's clearly not gaining momentum. They've been at it multiple years, maybe 4 or 5 years, and it's not gaining the momentum they want. And they actually fail to make the necessary changes towards this. So you kind of have to be proactive enough to see it, but also, making sure that, you are here for the long run, but being proactive enough to say that, look, this is not working, something needs to change. And every brand has their hero product. You just have to keep testing until you find it. You're going to have that hero product that I mentioned before, and it's going to be something in which drives majority of your revenue, drives new customers to your brand, and you just have to keep testing until you find it. So the next important lesson is, an influencer won't save you. Your strategy can't be that this influencer will post X and I'm hoping to get X results. It's just not how the market works anymore. It might have worked back in 2017, 2018, but that is simply not the case anymore. So one of the next lessons is getting the price of your product right can be crucial. Understanding your gross margin, the general rule of thumb is that you want your gross margin between 60 and 70%. And if you get it anything above that, then you've got great margins. I have seen in fashion where some people have like 80, even sometimes to like 90%. But roughly you want to at least have a 3 to 4 markup on your cost of goods sold. If you don't have that markup, you are going to find it extremely difficult to scale. You need the markup for ads, for operations, and when you start to scale, costs will naturally increase. So that is some of the lessons wrapped up for 2020. So as you can see here, the warehouse started to get quite a bit bigger. We started creating more space, and we actually started going on shoots, getting professionally shot product images, content for the brand. And within this time frame as well, we actually started working with a new manufacturer, which was our best manufacturer, to date. And then we still used them on and on again until 2024. but we'll get onto that in a little bit later. So the products got 10 times better. We knew what the market sort of wanted because we had some data from the previous years, and these items started to sort of really take the next stage for the brand's growth. We started to test new items and sample new products, and the quality was 10 times better than the previous manufacturers. So the lessons for this year was the 80-20 rule. 80% of the results are coming from 20% of the products. And fashion is no different. Yes, you're going to have new collections which draw new people in, but the foundational products, you want to make sure you keep those products in stock. Build more variants on them, create new colorways, new styles, and make sure you always have this in stock. This is one of the key things as well, is that if you have a hero product, make sure that you keep it in stock year round. And we sort of made the mistake first off of not keeping it in stock when the demand was there. And we wanted to test new products. As with, fashion, you have spring, summer, autumn, winter, and, maybe a collection in between. But the main key thing was keeping that product in stock for the customer and looking at the data again, not just using your judgment to say that, oh, I want to have this product, but you don't have the data to back it up. So the next thing is there are a million ways to lose money and only one way to actually make it. You want to keep your costs lean, avoid multiple agencies, 20 plus subscriptions. And the key rule of thumb here is that if it doesn't help directly contribute to, sales, growth of the business, leave it. You don't want to inflate your costs at this stage, especially when you're scaling up. You're going to have, more costs than you know it. So keep the rest of the things down. Try to do a lot of the things yourself, but also outsource when it's taking away your time and taking away, the value that you can put elsewhere to grow the brand. So we'll get onto that in a little bit. But the next thing is to don't copy the brands you think that are in the lead. Most of the time, it's actually noise. And if you don't know the circumstances, you don't know how much investment they've had, you don't know if they need to clear out that stock. There's just a lot of smoke and mirrors in the fashion industry. So don't copy brands that, think are doing well, because more often than not, it's a lot of the time it's smoke and mirrors. So the next thing, to unlock scale, it usually comes down to one of these four things: product, distribution, retention, and acquisition. Now, just to go over these quickly, products are going to be the main key driver here. If you have a poor product, your LTV is going to suck. You're not going to acquire customers easily. And if you can create new products, it's going to open up new markets and new people that want to buy your products. Because if you are a ceiling, a cap, and you can create new products for your brand that open up new sections of that market, you're effectively increasing the TAM of your brand, which is total addressable market. The next one is distribution. So where you sell your brand to. Now, the next one is retention. So how do you keep those customers keep coming back? How do you, within your marketing strategy, within, say, your email campaigns, having good quality products is going to increase your retention as well. And the next one is acquisition. So how do you profitably acquire customers at scale and do this over a long period of time, which is profitable for your brand? So the next lesson is calm amongst the chaos. Things will go wrong all of the time, but you just have to get used to it. And if you're scaling up fast, things are going to crack, things are going to go wrong. Just make sure you don't run the race too fast and make a bad decision that ultimately breaks your brand. Now, we're going to come on to 2022 here. Now, as you can see down below, we started making more room for the warehouse. We started knocking through walls and expanding the warehouse to the left. And sales started to grow even more. You know, I was hitting 200K months, multiple photo shoots a year, multiple collections, and the products kept getting better and better. These were some of the core products that we did that year. They were our military cargo pants, and we actually created these off the back of the success of these cargo pants here, the military cargo pants, because we figured out this was our best-selling product. So we then created more styles, more variations of this product. As you can see here, we've got orders. If you look at, that was just today, you know, all these orders at 6 o'clock. You know, we were scaling up pretty fast. This was another day, 20K day, you know, more stock inbound. And going back on creating more of the hero products, we then created more new styles of, you know, similar items that were selling at the time. And these then came on to become our best sellers as well. As you can see here, just some Shopify screenshot revenues, just so I can provide proof. But the lessons for this year was knowing your numbers, understanding your KPIs, CAC, LTV, MER, and just really getting a grips on the numbers. I wish I'd have done this a lot earlier on, and understand them even more, because at the time, especially when you're growing a brand, you don't have the knowledge, the information, you're just kind of winging it. You know, you're buying stock, you're not really looking at the data too much, and all right, this works, let's do more of that. And you need to really look at it as a business sense. You know, look at forecasting, look at the numbers, have a proper P&L, have a good accountant that sends you reports. So the next thing is to don't try and scale too fast. Walk before you can run, or you end up with more problems that will cost you money, either in your business or health-wise. And it's not a nice thing to have, really. If you're constantly stressed, it's going to impact the way you make decisions, run your business. And the next one is actually to run your own race. You don't know exactly how long other brands have been, you know, running profitable. It's all smoke and mirrors in the industry. So you don't have a clear idea of what other brands are doing. Focus on your own lane, focus on your own things, and just run your own race. The next one, forecast properly. If you don't have a clear idea of where you're going in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, and you're buying stock on a whim, or you're only doing it when it runs out, you're not running the business properly. And this is one of the key things here that is so important. You know, if you're not looking back at the data again, you know, I'll keep saying things that relate to data. It's because it's so important. It should be guiding your decisions on most of the decisions that you make. So the next thing in this year was outsource anything that costs you time or takes away your time from the more important tasks. So customer service, make sure in the early days to do everything yourself. Learn it yourself before you then outsource it. You're just going to have to suck it up and get busy. You know, do it for a bit of time. After you've done it, then outsource it, because you know the ins and outs of everything. You can tell your team, communicate that with your team, how it should be done, and these are the ins and outs. The next thing is you should always be learning. Be careful who you take advice from, especially people who haven't achieved what you want, or people always have opinions, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should listen to them. Make sure you Make sure you do your due diligence on them. And if you don't think it's right for you, you know, take it with a pinch of salt. Unless they've actually been and done what you want, then, you know, just take your advice on the chin. If you can, go and visit your manufacturers. Build that strong relationship with them. At the end of the day, they're your partners. So they're going to give you better supplier terms, payment terms, there's so many different things that come from actually building a relationship with your suppliers. So go and see them if you can. If you can fly over to China, that's probably where 99% of they're gonna be. So if you can do it that time, once you've built up a bit more of a sort of cash position, you're a bit more established in the brand, go and see your factory. They'll appreciate it more than you can ever imagine, and it'll just help your business as well. So this is the next section on the timeline, which was 2023. This one, things got a little bit more hectic. We ran out of room at our warehouse, and yeah, things started to change and sort of to crack a little bit. We started to increase, we started to see more growth and growing pains within the business as well. So as you can see here, we've got like daily orders going out. I think this was at a time of Black Friday, which was chaos. I was working, so much time in the office, the warehouse, and things just began to started to crack. And I wasn't enjoying it too much anymore because I was so busy doing stuff. We had key employees that left, and it really put me on a back foot of making a key decision, which we'll come on to in a second. As you can see here, the content got better. Products got better. We got orders from celebrities like Harry Kane, pro footballers, Andy Robertson down here. And this was the time in which I made a decision to actually move from the warehouse we was at and take it to a third-party logistics. So now we'll actually come on to the lessons of that. So one of the key lessons for that year was never overstretch on stock. You can always buy more later on. Dead stock, stock tied up in production that takes months to be delivered. If you can't turn that into cash quickly, you're over leveraging if you are buying so much stock. So make sure, again, it comes down to forecasting and data. Make sure you get that right. And one of the key things here is as well is that we move to a third-party logistics, 3PL. Make sure you choose the right partner and you read the contracts properly. Business has sharks, and they're not going to care about you or your company. They care about what money they're going to get from you. And important details can be buried in the fine print. They can be sort of, sharks about it, and it can ruin your business if they have a hold of your stock. And it's so important to choose the right partner. Check the fees, check everything, and make sure you go off recommendations as well. It's like, again, I went off a recommendation, but it wasn't a great one. And I think he actually moved a month or two later, and I ended up sticking with him because I was in a contract. So sometimes do your due diligence. Make sure to check it, even if it's from a recommendation. So the next thing is, if you're stuck at a plateau, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't let pride or ego convince you that you know it all. The moment that you do think you know it all, you've already started losing. Make sure to reach out to people who've gone that little bit further, 2 steps ahead, and get their advice. It's going to be well worth, the cost of doing so, and it's going to help you avoid the so many mistakes that they've probably already been through. So as the business starts turning over more money, every decision needs to be thought through, including risk, because one bad business decision can cost you the full business. So this also leads on to be careful who you get into bed with in business. Do your due diligence, even if you think you know them. So again, it's just risk as well. It's like factoring in what risk can you take. Yes, you have to still take risk, but when the business gets bigger, ultimately the risks also get bigger as well. So you have to really analyze and weigh up these decisions carefully. So the next thing here is that what got you here won't get you to that next stage. You have to evolve as a person, and so does your business. This, is so key here, because even though all these lessons took me up until this point here, those lessons won't necessarily take you to that 8-figure stage, that next stage. in your business journey. So, always reach out to people who are a little bit further ahead, get their advice, because even if you spend like a couple of grand, how much could that stop you from making a bad decision that's going to cost you your business or make some bad mistakes? So as you can see here, this was the brand in 2024. We upped the content quality. We paid out more out for shoots, for content. And as you can see here, just some ad results. But the lesson in this one, most of them were covered in the year before, but diversify your channels. So don't do this too early on. You want to make sure you focus on one channel until you get to 7 figures, and then start looking to diversify. So again, it's about mitigating risk as well. Don't have all your eggs in one basket, because if one channel goes down, your Facebook ad account gets banned or something like this, you want to be able to still use other channels that still drive in revenue, whether that's wholesale, other channels like TikTok, Snapchat, everything like that. So this is basically a review of the timeline of this brand in a nutshell. And these are the lessons which I learned throughout this brand. Obviously, it's not all the lessons, but the key ones in which I could put in a timeline that I think are going to be most effective for people who are starting a brand or people who are in this, this journey part here and are still at a plateau. They're trying to get to that next stage. If you are looking for mentorship, one-to-one with myself, if I'm also mentioned about the factory connections in this video, check the links down below. Apply to book a call and see if you're a great fit with us. But yeah, make sure to check out the links below, and I hope this video you gain some insights and taken away at least one thing from